I know what you're thinking. Didn't you just review a Super Seducer game a few months ago? And you're right, because the so-called most controversial game of the year came out in March and it already has a sequel. And we're not even close to being done with this series, because there's already a Steam page for Super Seducer 3, which is described as the follow-up to the massive hit game Super Seducer 2. The same Super Seducer 2 that wasn't even on sale when they wrote this. I guess it shouldn't surprise anybody that a game primarily about lying to get laid sees no problem in being dishonest with their audience. That's not cool. There's a glimmer of hope at the beginning of Super Seducer 2 that suggests that maybe, just maybe, Richard LaRuina and the developers had listened to the criticism and worked hard to create a less loathsome product. The introduction video promises a game that's bigger, better, has more diversity, offers the ability to play levels from a woman's point of view, and even has a Scottish guy. It's true that this is a better and more inclusive game, but don't take that to mean that it's actually a good game, because it's not. We have a lot to talk about. The subtitle here is Advanced Seduction Tactics, which kinda makes it sound like a Metal Gear Solid game. The gimmick is to throw you into more complicated scenarios, such as trying to date a stripper, courting a girl half your age, or finding a gentle way to exit a date in order to hit on a supermodel. These are not the typical situations you'll run into while navigating the dating scene, but they're at least potentially more interesting than what we saw in the first game. The setup and gameplay remains largely the same. You'll watch a full-motion video clip that sets up some sort of dilemma, and then you'll have to choose the correct response. Regardless of whether you choose right or wrong, Richard will pop up afterwards and offer advice. And new to this game is a female co-host named Charlotte, who in theory will provide a woman's perspective to each choice. This is a good idea on paper, but Richard and Charlotte have zero chemistry. At times it feels like they actively hate each other, and not in a fun way. Unfortunately, this is the least of the game's problems. Probably the most troubling thing is that Super Seducer 2 is constantly sending mixed messages. There are points where it seems that maybe Richard understands how icky some of the tactics are, especially given where we are in 2018. But don't be fooled, because there's no softening here. A good example of that comes early in the game when the mission is to seduce a co-worker at your pharmaceutical company. Wait, did I say co-worker? What I meant to say was secretary. The mission is to try to sleep with your secretary. At first, Richard scolds the player for making the attractive woman bend over and gather up papers just to get a better look at her assets. He reminds you that there's a power dynamic difference and that you might gain a bad reputation for that kind of sexual harassment. But then we get a shot of her lusting over her new boss, and co-workers surprised that the two haven't hooked up yet. Richard suggests that if you let some time pass and maybe promote her a couple of times, then you've completed your imaginary checklist and you're free to ask her out on a date. Does this approach work? Maybe, I don't know. But it doesn't solve the problem that he's still her boss and that saying no to his sexual advances could have real ramifications on her job. There are also points where Richard takes a step back and lets other people take the lead. He says this is being done to be more inclusive, yet the game seems to go out of its way to recycle tired old stereotypes. Probably the most outrageous example of this comes with the introduction of Mahmoud, a morbidly obese 50-something who uses Tinder to pick up women half his age. That aspect's bad enough, but the whole thing is made worse when he trots out every offensive Arab cliché you can think of. He literally jokes about beheadings when introducing himself to the visibly nauseated young woman. The whole thing made my skin crawl. When you boot up the game, Richard seems sincere in wanting to improve the sequel based on feedback. That's honestly the right attitude to take, but I don't buy it for a second. Instead of learning from the mistakes, the game constantly finds a way of mocking and commenting on those that bashed the first game. Here's just one of the many examples of the game going after the critics.
Hey, what's up?
Hi.
Why are there prostitutes here?
Why are there prostitutes here?
Roger.
Who's Roger? It's your friend? Oh fuck, not this guy. Alright, mate, how you doing? Good to see you. To leave? Where are we going? Private room? Champagne? Hang on. Let me just get this. Yeah, see you, darling. So Charlotte, guy on YouTube called the girls in the first game prostitutes. Is that a good thing to say to a girl?
What do you think? Honestly.
If they're not prostitutes, and even if they are, it's not very nice,
It's
right?
not very nice.
But the worst thing is if they actually watch it after, which they did.
Oh gosh.
Can you imagine?
No.
What if their mums watched it?
Oh.
Not very nice. Bad.
We get a bunch of these types of responses to those that didn't like the game, which kind of makes it look petty and bitter. This is the most thin-skinned game I've ever played. You see, every change feels like it was made out of protest. We see this when the game switches perspectives and gives women advice to how to flirt with men. This is certainly not the worst idea the game has, but it's definitely easier and more straightforward than the other levels. It also comes extremely late in the game and after a rough stand-up comedian routine that mocks the Me Too movement.
Maybe I'm getting older, but I don't understand all the stuff that people complain about these days. Like some of the Me Too stuff, I totally get it. Guys like Harvey Weinstein, that guy's an animal. You know what I mean? That guy should be in jail. But it's some of the other people, like somebody complained that Dustin Hoffman asked her for a blowjob like 20 years ago or whatever, and she felt uncomfortable. And it's terrible that she felt uncomfortable, but that's how we get blowjobs. You've got to be proactive about it. You've got to get out there and start asking the tough questions. You can't just sit at home on your couch waiting for a face to fall on your dick.
The problem is that even if Super Seducer 2 were to give out better advice, we would still be stuck with a game that's no fun to play. Even as a fan of bad video game acting, I found a lot of the performances to be more cringy than I could handle. There's a lot of terrible improv going on here, and I'm not sure Richard is as charming as he thinks he is. He seems to barrel into every situation with an unearned confidence that I just found to be obnoxious, though I'm sure it works on other people. What's more, the game not only retains the terrible editing from the first installment, but one-ups it by forgetting to include a bunch of text. Here's an example of both of those things happening at once. But we really shouldn't overlook the real issue here. It's full of crummy advice. The truth is, this game's only fun when you're purposely choosing the wrong options, and even that is never as satisfying as I would like it to be. The correct answer is usually pretty obvious and boring, though there were times when I audibly gasped when I heard the advice. Let me go ahead and spoil it for you so you don't have to waste any of your money. You need to lie your ass off, and if that doesn't work, shower the woman with money. That's really all it takes to be a super seducer. Between the mixed messages and crummy advice, I find Super Seducer 2 to be impossible to recommend. Not only does it fail at its intended purpose, but it's also a boring game where even the most outrageous moments feel tame. This claims to be filled with advanced seduction tactics, but the advice is predictable and might even get you sued for sexual harassment. Super Seducer 2 may want to be the next great educational tool, but in reality it's a toothless dating simulator with terrible acting and even worse advice. This is a lame series. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. So here's the question I have for you. What do you think is the most controversial game of all time? There isn't a right answer here, so you're not being quizzed. You can measure controversy in a lot of ways, from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas being pulled off the shelves due to hot coffee, to Night Trap getting name-checked by a bunch of angry senators. There's so many choices that I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, I'm currently hard at work on a bunch of reviews, including The Gardens Between, Elia, Multitask Master, Crime Girl, and more. If you want to stay up to date, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.